Hey, welcome to Bible EFC Collision 2020. I'm James Forbes. Some of you probably remember me from last year doing the Collision. This year I'll be sharing this. I'm doing it for the first 2 weeks, and then Pastor Neil and then Pastor Tim will take the last 2 weeks. Today we're gonna begin Collision this year. We're gonna talk. Our first ism we're gonna cover is postmodernism. Postmodernism. And I should say first, I want to apologize. I know we're in this austere environment, right? Like very different type thing. Neil and we did our best to light this room up so it's not. Yesterday it was dark, and when we tried to do a test recording, I looked like a creepy dude filming from his basement. But apparently putting a tree, some green behind me is the answer. Green equals no creepy. So we've done our best. Hopefully it goes well. Hopefully this tape shows well for you guys. But before we start, we're going to talk about postmodernism. But if you want the slides I'm using that you will see on the screen, if you just hit pause on the video right now, and Nikki, who is super awesome, I think she went ahead and added that either as a PDF or something like that, added these slides in the comments. And so if you want to download those or print them off real quick and use those to take notes or just follow along, or you can just watch the screen. But if you want to do that, pause. I'll give a few seconds and then we'll get going. Okay, notes or not, here we go. So to frame as we move through postmodernism, I want you to kind of think about two questions initially. Can you know reality and truth? Can you even know moral truth? So can you know reality and truth, even moral truth? And our second question, can you know what a text or a language means? So for instance, when Abraham Lincoln wrote the Emancipation Proclamation, Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto, Apostle Paul wrote the book of Romans. Can you even know what those texts mean and what the meaning of them are? That's going to help us frame this as we move through. So what is postmodernism? Postmodernism is difficult because really it has no clear, maybe even no definition. If it does, it's like nailing Jello to a wall to try to come up with a definition for postmodernism. And that's not me being wise or a little smart aleck. That's just kind of the truth of postmodernism. In fact, a postmodern mindset is that there's a removal of absolute standards. There is no absolute standards, and this even includes the meaning of words. So there is no clear definition for postmodernism. Next, within postmodernism, there's no big picture. There's no big picture, and I mean there's no overarching account or interpretation of things that provides a general structure. Postmoderns, I'll give you a few of their words here and there. Some of them are a little bigger, but a postmodern would say that there's no meta-narratives. There's no overarching big story that provides structure for things within or below it. What else is postmodernism? It would tell us that everything is interpretation and knowledge is dependent on tradition. Everything is interpretation. So one of the most famous quotes in postmodernism is, "There is no outside text." That's that meta-narrative, right? Without that, you're just left to interpretation. There's no big picture. There's nothing that you fall back on. So everything's just kind of up for grabs. Everything is interpretation. And everything is dependent, all knowledge is dependent on tradition, every interpretation we have just really relies on a previous interpretation, which relies on a previous interpretation. Everything's interpretation all the way back. And what's interesting is that, or moving on to the next point, for postmoderns, there is a real world. There is a reality that exists, but we have no direct or immediate access to it. We can't see it as it really is. And what they would call this is that we are situated. We're situated by all of our historical factors, our location, our culture, our backgrounds, even our language. That no one is objective. And the word they use for objective is neutral. So no one is neutral or objective. And these lenses that we see through that kind of are kind of cultural biased lens, for lack of better terms, we have them and we cannot remove them. There's no way to become objective, to get a true direct gaze at reality. So that kind of sets up what postmodernism is in a kind of a quick survey form. So we definitely need to address a few things that postmodernism is not, that often get confused. So postmodernism is not moral relativism. All right, it is not moral relativism. Moral relativism, you see the definition there, is things like if you think abortion is wrong, then that's wrong for you, but that doesn't mean it's wrong for me. It's okay maybe for people in this foreign country or that foreign country to torture prisoners or to do something we consider wrong, but that's okay for them. Relative to them, it's okay, even if it's wrong for us. What's the difference? There is a difference, a clear difference between moral relativism and postmodernism. The difference is relativism assumes that you can have that neutral, that objective view of the options of these competing ideas. Is it right or is it wrong? Is abortion right or wrong? You can look at both of them and see the arguments and see the theories and ideas perfectly clearly to figure out if they're relative to each other. Postmodernism says you can't even see them clearly, so you could never try to compare them. And also, relativism is an issue of modern times, and postmodernists reject all that is modern. The next one, religious pluralism, is not postmodernism. Religious pluralism, all roads lead to heaven. Could be a summation of religious pluralism. How is this not postmodernism? I should say that some postmodernists are religious pluralisms, where everything is just so interpretation, and every interpretation can either be true or have truth, that maybe all roads could lead to heaven, but they are not the same. And how they are not the same is pluralism claims that it's wrong to say that James Forbes cannot say that my view is the right view, it is the correct view. Right? That's wrong to do. But a postmodern, as we said a minute ago, a postmodern I couldn't even look at my view versus your view and look at them honestly to compare them to even try to see which one's right, because I won't be able to see both of them openly and honestly. So that's what postmodernism is not. It is not moral relativism and it is not religious pluralism, although you will, with some, see an overlap. So, postmodernism does, though, dive into three areas that I think are important to us. The first one, and perhaps the defining one for postmodernism, is language and interpretation. Language and interpretation. So for a postmodern, meaning is in the reader or the listener, not the text. So right now, what I am saying doesn't really get, what I'm saying doesn't necessarily have meaning. It might for me, but as you hear it, or maybe later watch this, you have to interpret it. And your interpretation is what really matters. Your interpretation gives it its truth value rather than what I'm saying now. And there's two possible reasons for this in a postmodern view. That the meaning is in the reader or the listener and not the text. Two possible reasons. First one, either there is no intrinsic, that means essential, whether there is no intrinsic meaning in a text, or we can translate between languages, like you take the Greek New Testament from Greek to English, perhaps. But we can translate, but we can't look at, evaluate, and assess those two texts from a common standard to really say, do they mean the same thing? Which one has truth in it? And so when I look at that first one, it's interesting when we say text has no meaning, there's no intrinsic meaning to text. From a postmodern of that slant, your thoughts are text, your speech is text. They're really just brain writings that are text. And so even your thoughts and your speech are subject to interpretation. And very interestingly, even the world itself is a text that has to be interpreted. And with what that means is there's no essence to anything. There's no common essence. And since there's no common essence, like if there's an apple, there's nothing common about all apples that give them a thing called appleness. So, for instance, like that all apples share. And so with words, if there's no essence, then a text isn't really tied to reality. It really is how I view it and interpret it. And the second one, evaluating the text, but we can't really look at them from a common standard. It means that meaning is not the intention of the writer or the speaker when using language. It's not what someone meant. Instead, meaning is gathered. Meanings basically are a matter of use. They're a matter of behavior. So the meaning that something has is the behavior people use regarding that within a community. It's kind of an interesting concept, right? Meaning is seen through action, and that action is seen within a community. I wish we could take questions now, but if you have questions, please write them down. We will address them at the Q&A time this Sunday. And that will be a live Q&A. So next, what is a postmodern person? I want to look at personhood a little bit. So a postmodern person. A person is the story told about him or her. It's his or her narrative. All right? That sounds kind of weird. A person is the story told about her. So community traditions, the traditions and histories and culture provide this kind of bigger context for your individual story to be told in. And as your story is told, remember we talked about behavior, morality being like a behavior. Your behavior starts acting out within that community. It's acted out in that community, and your actions under the confines of that community define who and what you are, at least functionally. So you are what you do as defined by your community's language. Like I just said, it's you acting out, and your community defines kind of the parameters of what your person is and what you should do within that community. And finally, this is kind of interesting, you are in an endless process of self-creation. So there's a number of different kind of terms, like fragments is a term used by some postmoderns, that your life is lived in fragments rather than kind of like this. Remember, there's no meta-narrative, so it's kind of lived in fragments, no big picture. And so as you begin to act out your life in a community, you are constantly kind of self-creating into a new, I don't want to say new self, but of a new self within this community, becoming more part of this community, becoming more who you are as you move along, kind of continually creating and becoming more engrafted in the community which you find yourself, or which you align yourself. And from personhood, I want to look at postmodern morality. If you can't read that joke, it's okay. It's only somewhat funny. If you have the notes, you can read it. So, postmodern morality. Morality is found, for the postmodern, it's found in community traditions, history, and narrative. I've used those words a little bit. Traditions, history, and narrative. Narrative is a big word for postmoderns. Remember, everything's about language. So it's morality, personhood, text. Everything is a text. Everything is about language. And so for them, narrative is a big word. But morality is found in community traditions, history, and narrative. And that's where I think some people will get confused with relativism as well. If it's my community or my culture that tells me something is right or wrong, and that other culture says something's right or wrong, that's relative. Well, again, remember, it's not so much that it's relative, because relativism says we can see both of them clearly. Postmodernism says, no, we just use a different language game or construct. We're not saying they're wrong or they're right. We're just saying we're right for our interpretation. So it's found in a community tradition, or community traditions, history, and narrative. Narrative being that important word. A moral person is an inheritor of a community language. There it is, narrative, language, being used over and over again. A moral person is an inheritor of a community language. So much so that some postmoderns, at least some that I've read, I have seen a number of them write that if you're not within a community, you can't be a moral person. It doesn't mean you're immoral per se, it just means you can't be a moral person. Maybe you're like amoral, like atheist means without God or opposing God or against God. It would be you're not moral. And so a moral person is an inheritor of a community language. You're being brought into a community, and that helps you develop morality and find morality. And interestingly enough is that because you have to be brought into a community and it's based on narrative and history and tradition, postmodern morality and their virtues are progressive. So they kind of grow and can change, and maybe we learn more and become more moral. We're more moral than they were during biblical times because we're smarter and we've grown more and have more of a history. There could be that thought. And that's also where like the emergent church and the progressive church, a little different. They're each a little different, but why those are such problems. They hold on to a postmodern slant to Scripture and to God and to Christianity, and they are very progressive. They want to reinterpret things in a progressive way. And the final point for postmodern morality. So, we look at Americans, we tend to be this is kind of this cultural swing. We want to be super tolerant, as culture defines, sometimes misdefines tolerance, but super tolerant of other cultures, different moral codes, and postmodernism telling us that there is no universal standard that we can know. If there is one, we can't know it. We can't know a universal standard that is true for all people. And so with that, the one thing that is wrong, even universally wrong, is we are not to oppress others by imposing our values on them. Because our values are just an interpretation as well, just as theirs are. So we can't know if there is something that's binding, what it is, and tell them that it is binding, because we just can't know. And therefore, live and let live. So there's some issues with postmodernism. We did a quick survey of kind of a few key points within it, all really revolving around language and narrative. And I'm not postmodern. I don't think Christians can be postmodern. But that does not mean that everything about postmodernism should be thrown away, or that, maybe said a better way, that we can't learn anything from postmodernism. I think if we look at people who are sincerely trying to articulate postmodernism and kind of why they lean that way, for some of them, I think we can learn some good things that we could apply to ourselves. And so first, they focus on practice. So they don't look at some abstract theory or ideology or philosophy of truth and life, because if there was one, you couldn't know it. Remember, there's no meta-narrative. So they focus on how they live now. They focus on practicing life. And so for somebody like me, who tends to theorize and philosophize, right, that can be that's probably a good reminder and can be a challenge that life isn't to be just lived up here in the high levels of academia, but that it ought to be practiced. How do we live? How is our life lived out? And I think that's something for us to ask and to consider. Authenticity. This may be perhaps at a practical level the most important thing for postmoderns, is they want to be authentic. They want to be authentic to themselves within their community, and they want to live an authentic life. That's something important for us as Christians. Do we do anything we do as a Christian within the church, out in our community? Do we do it because we think we should do it? Do we do it because we think it'll make us look good, it'll make more money, it'll do this, bring me esteem? Or are we being authentic to ourselves? Are we doing something because it deepens our authenticity? It makes us a more honest person and gets us to live who God really made us to be. And so we can learn authenticity and kind of be redirected to authenticity by a postmodern view. Also, this is a big one, importance of community. Something a lot of us are having a tough time struggling with right now is how to find community. And as we're struggling under this quarantine, for lack of better terms, with COVID, is community is important. Remember, everything for them is defined through language via a community. Community is very ill-defined, probably as poorly defined as postmodernism is itself. What is a community for postmodernism? That's a good question, one we can't go into now, maybe if it comes up in Q&A. But community is important to them. That's where you find your personhood. That's where you find your morality. That's where truth is gained or maybe adhered to, is within community. Something we can learn from them as Christians is we need to learn to share our faith by living, not just telling. I know the quote that's given to St. Francis of Assisi, preach the gospel always, and if necessary, use words. There's some people in my own faith tradition who hate that quote because you got to preach the gospel. Amen. You need to share the gospel. However, with a postmodern, and I'm not saying you don't share the gospel, what can impact them is not just you telling them the gospel, not just you sharing Jesus. Remember, what they don't like is that if you're saying this is the truth, they can have a hard time with that. They are already they're scared, they're angry they're tentative with, they kind of push away authority and dogma. And so you can share the faith, but what's going to gain them, remember, who you are in morality is that which is lived out. And so if they see a life lived that is a positive life, that is a life that they go, that person has something that is making their life great. If you can live that type of life, then they're more likely to go, hey, you've been telling me about this, and you're living this way that seems authentic and that seems to have something to it. They may want to know more. Or even if you haven't really been able to share with them yet, they're going to be open to what you have to say because they've seen an authentic life. And so living your faith as well as telling it becomes important. And the last one, don't be arrogant. So something to know about postmodernism is it came on for all intents and purposes, it's coming on the scene as kind of a livable philosophy. We could say that it started decades, if not centuries, before some of the ideas of postmodernism, but becoming kind of a livable philosophy started post-World War II. People became disenchanted with government authorities. I mean, think about now in our current political climate, how much distrust do some of us have for leaders of all political levels, of media, of church leaders and church authority. And so they pulled back from that because some of these authorities said, this is true, I have the truth. And then, as Nietzsche said, they use it as a will to power. I have truth, and therefore I'm going to be over you and control you with the truth I have. And so they didn't like that arrogance, and they wanted to pull back and say, look, nobody has it all. Nobody has a complete, full picture of all that there is. And so they pulled back from that, and they don't like the arrogance of that, and then pulled back, I think, a little too far with everything is interpretation. So don't be arrogant, you will push them away. Some of us might have greater accusations thrown against them of arrogance than others. So we've looked at some of the stuff that postmodernism is, a few positives that we can probably learn or think through as Christians, both individually and collectively. I want to give it a few critiques. First one is on interpretation. So if truth is in the reader, what is a postmoderner even saying? Why use your words at all? Why write, right? If I'm a postmodern and I say everything's interpretation, why would I even write that to you? Are you even going to read what I'm saying the way I want you to hear it? You're just going to interpret it. So if truth is just in how I hear or read what you say, what are you even saying? And what's interesting is that even postmoderns, they seem to treat certain things as really representing reality. Like these writers who write about postmodernism, they really, if they're writing because they think their words have meaning. They think that by writing this book and publishing it and producing it and sending it out, that people will read it, understand what is being said in it, and agree with it. Think, yeah, that is a good way. They won't read it and think, wow, I just read these words and this guy wants to massacre little children, right? That would just be an interpretation, but he doesn't think I'm going to think that. He thinks I'm going to read his words for what they are. And so they do seem to think there's reality. Importantly, what's the history and traditions? If history and traditions are past, how can we look back at our history and traditions, read about them or hear about them, and understand what they really were? Or are we just living an interpretation of what our history, or living currently through a filter of what we interpret our history and traditions to be? In that case, history and traditions don't matter because we can't even know what they were. But they treat history and traditions as if they are a real thing. So, a few critiques on postmodern personhood. Remember, postmodern personhood, a person on postmodernism, personhood or a person has no absolute essential properties, except for some. Perhaps maybe having a body would be the only thing. But there's nothing about you that you have to have that makes you a person. Very interesting. And if there's no essence to you, and this might go a little too deep, but if there's no essence to you, nothing about you that really is you, how can you even know you? How can you know, remember, if your thoughts, your internal thoughts, are even text that have to be interpreted by you? How can you even know your own thoughts, your own intentions? How can you accurately think back on memories and not have those just be an interpretation? And how can you even know your own self if you are interpreting who yourself is and can't really know it? It's very interesting. And next, if you have no properties and you are just an enacted, to use their term, an enacted narrative within a community construct, you are little more than, as I wrote here, Reepicheep or Snape, or you can enter your favorite character of fiction. I entered two of my favorites. Like you're little more than just a character of fiction. The only difference is you happen to be real. but you're just a narrative that's being told. There's nothing essential to you. Morality, a few critiques on morality. And as we move into morality, right, I think this is kind of this middle point between personhood and morality. As we move there, if there's no essential properties to you, and you're a little more, if not any more than a kind of a character in a narrative, you can see why this makes, in a postmodern society or society going towards postmodern, why you can see something like abortion being so easily defended. Like, abortion's fine. After all, like, a human being, up until it's born, what's its narrative? How has it lived within the community? How has it been defined and began to even enact a narrative within the community? So without a narrative of its own, what is it? It's nothing on a postmodern perspective, or little on a postmodern perspective, so it makes it easy. And that moves us into morality. So for their morality, I would ask the question, is it wrong to torture babies for fun only because of our narrative? Only because of our traditions and the way we interpret things? Is it only wrong that it's fun to torture babies because that's our narrative? What if our narrative changes? What about another culture's narrative? What if they say it's okay? So now, few more minutes here, because I know I have a time limit. I'm going to try to stay under it. We'll see. I want to look at a biblical response. So we're going to look at two things. We're going to look at a biblical response to postmodernism, then we're going to look at a Christian response, more of a general Christian worldview response. Biblical response. Grab my Bible here. So we're going to look at first the Bible, the Word, right? Language, the text. And so the Word, biblical response is the Word is true, or it has true and objective meaning. If I look at Joshua, we'll look at Old Testament first. Joshua 1:8. Joshua 1:8 tells us that the book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. It seems to say that there is something about it that you can lean back on, that you need to adhere to what it says. Not what you think it says, but what it says, so that things may go well with you. But you need to meditate on it and do as it says. Go ahead to 2 Samuel 22:31. It says, "As for God, his way is blameless. The word of the Lord is," I have the NASB, it says tested. But when you look at the Hebrew word there, and other versions of the Bible have it written a little closer to the word is proven or true from the Hebrew. So the word of the Lord is proven, or it is true. And then if we look into John, book of John, moving into the New Testament, John 8:32 says, Jesus there is dealing with the truth of God's word effectively. And he says, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. So counter to postmodernism, there is truth, and it will set you free. You shall know the truth. Well, what is the truth? Again, we look and stay in John to chapter 17, verse 17. Jesus is praying to God, and he says, "Father, sanctify them in your word. Your word is truth." So we should know the truth. It will set us free, and that truth is found in his word. What is his word? Well, we have it here, but if we look at John 1:1, it says, "In the beginning was the Word," speaking of Jesus. "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." Jesus is the Word that is the truth, who, if we know, will set us free. Jesus was the exact imprint of God's nature, as Hebrews says. And then we can look at 2 Timothy 3:16 as well. You can do that on your own to what is the Word of God and what can it do. Next, I think we go again to personhood. Bible would teach us that you are not just a body or an interpretation. You are not just a body or an interpretation. Genesis 1:27, and I know I have here it's written 2:27. That should actually be 2:7, not 2:27. So Genesis 1:27 and 2:7. 1:27, let us create man in our image. And then 2:7, God took from the dust of the earth, different from any other creature he created, took dust from the earth and blew the breath of life into it to create man. And if we look at Psalm 139, shot right past it. Psalm 139, and some of us are familiar with verse 14, but I think if we read it in context, it paints a better picture. For you formed my inward parts, you wove me together in my mother's womb. I give thanks to you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul, not just body, and my soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully brought about in the depths of the earth. Your eyes have seen my unformed substance, and in your book were written all the days that were ordained for me, when as yet there was not one of them. So we're more than a body, and even our days, which remember our life is supposed to be wrapped up in this interpretive community, this narrative. God says, I ordain the narrative. The narrative is from me, and I gave it even before your days came to be. So it's not through some interpretation of community. God already gave us that narrative. And then looking at Matthew on the New Testament and 1 Corinthians, if you look those up, those deal specifically with persons not just being a body, but there's also a soul component to us. There's something immaterial about us. Morality. The Bible would teach us that there are objective moral values and duties. In Romans 1:18 through 20, Paul's writing here about that God's eternal laws have been evident to people, but they deny those, right? That he's made it very clear to us in his creation and nature. And so they're not just an interpretation, but they are made clear in his creation to us. And he set them up for all peoples. If we look at the 10 Commandments, God makes clear, he says in Exodus 20, here's 10 Commandments. These are a law of morality. Right? And they deal with both the vertical, us and God, and they deal with the horizontal, us and other people. They kind of encapsulate all that. They encapsulate what's between us and God and people. And then when we go to the New Testament in Mark 12, Jesus talks, when he's asked what the greatest commandment is, he doesn't just he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. He doesn't just take the vertical. He also says, and the horizontal, and the second is like it, love others as yourself. But his very definition, one, points to that we're more than a person, because our morality encapsulates our whole being. It's our heart. It's our mind. It's our soul. All those were words used in the New Testament, different Greek words that were different parts of a person, from material to immaterial to a whole self. But then, and he also says strength, which is from our body. So Jesus, he doesn't just do the vertical and the horizontal, but he incorporates our whole being into morality. And then Psalm 119, this is verses 9 through 11. I will read this. This is a great verse to memorize. I was told to memorize it as a young man. I did, but just so I don't goof it up on the spot, I'm going to read it. Psalm 119, 9 through 11. How can a young person keep their way pure? By keeping it according to your word. With all my heart I have sought you. Do not let me wander from your commandments. Your word I have treasured in my heart, that I might not sin against you. So it's through God's word and his revelation that we find our objective moral values and duties. And on to our final slide. Not as fun without audience interaction. Not as fun. So we looked at the biblical response to kind of the language game that they will play with the word. We looked at personhood. as a biblical response to what personhood is and to what morality is. Very briefly, very survey form. But now I want to look at the Christian response, kind of a general Christian stance and position against postmodernism. And so first I want to start with meaning is. Underline that, circle it, whatever. Meaning is in the text. When Paul wrote Romans, right? When he wrote 1 Corinthians, when Mark wrote Mark, when John wrote the Gospel of John, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and Revelation, he meant something when he used those words. He had a meaning that he wanted to convey. He was not just writing some words saying, well, whatever they think it is one day, that's what it'll be. He wrote it because he said, this is what they need to know. Right? Meaning is in the text. And I promise you, Abraham Lincoln, when he gave the Emancipation Proclamation, imagine if we treated that postmodernly and didn't treat it as he meant something when he said it, and we just interpreted it differently. Could we get slavery again? Could we start treating people that? No, he meant something. He meant that it was to be done away with. Right? So meaning is in the text, and the intent of the writer matters. Next, truth and reality can be known. We can know what is real and what is true. Here's where I think the postmoderns goof it up, is they think to know something, you have to know it comprehensively, exhaustively. Right? How many things do we know that well? I've been married to my wife 17 years. There's some things I know very clearly about her, know very well about her, but I still do not know her completely. I doubt any of us know ourselves absolutely exhaustively. I'm still discovering things about myself. Wow, like I'll try something new, like, man, how have I never tried that before? I really enjoyed that. I'm still discovering things about myself. You don't have to know something exhaustively to know it. I will never know God exhaustively, but I know that He is loving, even if I cannot know fully the infinity of His love. Next, learn to speak to the needs of people in evangelism. So remember, for a postmodern, it's not just about evidence. And some evidence they're not even going to think about because it comes from a source that you can't really know, or it comes from a source of authority that they may distrust. But learn to ask questions and speak to the need of that individual. Where are they at, and where are they hurting? Where are they struggling? And how do we inject ourselves into their life and show them love and care? That needs to be our response. Remember, don't be arrogant. That's a big deal to them. And then finally, authenticity. We need to pit authenticity against rejection of moral authority and accountability. Remember, authenticity is so important for the postmodern person. But also, they reject moral authorities. They don't like a church denomination or a government or people saying, you cannot do this. This is wrong. They don't like that. They don't want the moral authority, and they also don't want the accountability. Neil's back there sneezing, trying to mess up the audio. Or that's him telling me I'm out of time. So they don't want moral authority, they don't want accountability, but they do want authenticity. Here's the issue, is that every day they open their eyes, they are submitting themselves in some form or fashion to a moral authority and some form of accountability. If they are an American postmodern, they are choosing to live in this country as an American citizen or as a nationalized citizen or an immigrant. They are choosing to be here, and by choosing that, they are implicitly or explicitly saying, I am submitting to the moral authority of this government and the accountability that comes with that. There's laws that say I can and can't do certain things. If I break those, I don't get to say I didn't want to listen to that. I will be held accountable for that. So they are always, forever in their life, giving themselves to some form of moral accountability and authority. but they want authenticity. Here's the deal, is they can't even know themselves fully, if I'm right. None of us know ourselves fully. They are already submitting themselves to some authority or accountability. What I say we do is we inject and say, since you're already doing that, can I introduce you to the Jesus I know from Scripture? To let him, not the church, but him serve as your moral authority and accountability. Will you let him do it? Because ultimately, he is your creator, your designer, as we saw in Psalm 139, in Colossians chapter 1. He created you. He knows you. And he, if you will submit to him, he can bring you to your authentic self. If you continue to submit to other authorities, you will never find yourself. If you want to be authentic, it is through your creator. And I think that is maybe a tactic for evangelism with them, is to teach them that only through Christ can they have true authenticity. So that's it for today. I really wish we could have interaction, but we can't, and I really want to be under 45 minutes. I'm at 46. I apologize. But please, so send your questions. If you have questions, they came up, send them to Neil at BibleEFC.org. That'll be Pastor Neil's email address. And then on Sunday, on the 10th of May at 6 p.m. on our adults Facebook page, the Bible EFC Adults Facebook page, we're going to have a live Q&A. I'll be here. Neil will be there probably asking some questions. I think Pastor Tim might be here. Maybe he'll help me a little bit, maybe challenge me a little bit as well. My recommendation is if you have questions, don't wait for the live Q&A. Send them to Neil now. He'll compile stuff. Maybe he'll make them a little harder for me to catch me on the moment. But you have a higher likelihood of your question being answered if you write them in beforehand rather than if you just wait for the live Q&A. But please come in the live Q&A, and that's when you can ask questions and we can really, hopefully, dialogue better with some of the things you're probably wondering and questioning now. That's all I have. Thank you so much for taking part in this. I hope that you're there Sunday, and I hope this collision series ends up being good for all of us. Thanks. God bless.